2025 has been an amazing year for gacha games. We got a ton of new reveals, info on upcoming games, new hits, new releases and updates to our existing favorites. But for me, no game has stood out this year like Girls Frontline 2. Now, it should be noted that Girls Frontline 2 isn't new, technically. While the game released globally late 2024, it's been around in China for quite a while longer with its own slew of updates, controversies, and other shenanigans, which have made the game's global version an insanely polished product that's been improving a ton over the past year. Do you need to have played the original Girls Frontline to understand the story of this game? Honestly, not really, as Girls Frontline 2 is an expert at creating a story for both newcomers and returning veterans. But since I already made an entire video about that a couple months ago, for this video, as the game is celebrating its first global anniversary, I'll be looking at the entire package in terms of gameplay and content, and tell you why you should experience this game if you haven't yet. But what kind of game even is Girls Frontline 2, as all the popular clips online are usually just flashy animations and people loving certain, designs? Well, the game is best described as a turn-based tactics game, in the same vein as games like XCOM and Fire Emblem. For each battle you control a squad of characters, each with their own weapon, skills and traits, and battle against enemies who more often than not heavily outnumber you. You fight on maps made up of grid squares with directional cover and hazards dotting the map. All these battles are fought in very nice looking locales ranging from the standard wastelands and shantytowns to expansive resorts in the digital realm called Level 2. Each playable character, who are androids called dolls, fit into a specific class, elemental type and weapon. For example, Groza is a bulwark class, focusing on stable defensive buffs and counterattacks, and she deals physical damage with her hallmark OTS-14 assault rifle. Meanwhile, Krolik is a vanguard class, made to be the first into the fray to deal debuffs and deals fire damage using her sword called the Hare. As you can expect, team composition is the bread and butter of Girls Frontline 2's battles. Certain characters have amazing synergies with each other through both active and passive buffs and debuffs, allowing you to take advantage of certain things like enemy weakness to certain elemental damage or weapon types. One of my favorite teams to run at the moment is a fire team consisting of Krolik, Vector, Chongyu and Cheetah, where it all hinges on Krolik and Cheetah debuffing the enemy and buffing the doll team before the others bring in the hurt with both AoE attacks and pinpoint strikes. You fight against bands of humans, robots and mutated creatures and huge bosses who each have their own special flavor and weaknesses. Where the human bandits known as the Varjägers focus mostly on ranged combat, heavy shields and grenades, the mutated Aelids often continuously spawn in new enemies and can even poison your dolls. And because each enemy faction is different, this too reinforces the game's emphasis on team composition, as not every team is going to perform well against enemies on both higher difficulties or in this slew of extra game modes. And it's those non-standard game modes that make Girls Frontline 2 an amazingly content-rich experience. Aside from the many story chapters of the game to play through, there's a gold mine of other ways to play the game. There are quite a few standard modes which focus on clearing increasingly difficult stages to get the resources to upgrade your dolls, their weapons and stats, and your base. But there's also boss fights for special tickets to spend, a mode called Peak Value Assessment, whose extreme mode allows you to fine-tune how strong the enemies are, expansion drills which give enemies special buffs, and even non-linear PvP battles where you select a lineup of dolls as a defensive formation and try to attack those of other players. It's basically a way to flex your builds and pulls. You also have quite a few less traditional game modes like Inverse Cipher, where you take control of enemy units in a more puzzle-based scenario. The roguelike artifact recovery with random dolls, buffs, scenarios, and my personal way to spice up the game, Boundary Push, which turns the game into a semi-top-down shooter with roguelike elements, but it's not turn-based unless you mess up. Instead, both you and the enemies just roam around, and it completely changes the game and makes you appreciate the fluidity of both animation and combat a lot more. But all of these fun game modes don't hold a candle to the insane number of things to do all the limited time events bring into the mix. Girls Frontline 2 has limited time events running essentially all the time to mark new updates to the game, which often introduce new characters and weapons, new chapters to the main story or fun side stories, new items to get by grinding supply stages, and a whole lot of minigames to spruce up the gameplay. It's these minigames that make me love each limited time event, as they often bring the game into a completely different genre. We got things like Path Forger, which is a fun version of Monopoly, a shooting gallery called Assault Simulation, Frontline Survivors, which is exactly what it sounds like, a doodle jump-alike called Jump Dinnergate, a cat cafe management simulator, and even things like a rhythm game and a racing minigame. These fun minigames allow you to take a nice break from the core gameplay for fun rewards, and it's just icing on this content-rich cake. But that's not even everything. In the game's latest update for the global server, celebrating 1 year since launch, Girls Frontline 2 added the most technologically and aesthetically insane thing to the game, the crew deck. The crew deck is essentially a social space for you and quite a few of your favorite dolls to hang out, with a lounge, an armory, a recreational room, and even a poolside terrace just to vibe. It should be noted how beautiful this entire space is, with the same detail we've come to know from the game's character models and maps being brought into the social space. But the crew deck is far more than just a pretty space to look at your pretty characters. You can also interact with them in a multitude of ways. They can cook you a meal, you can enjoy a drink with them, or just chat them up about their daily struggles to gain some more affinity with them. The crew deck is also the space to unlock more lore and backstory for your dolls, and their associated faction or squad. The crew deck is also pretty customizable with things like decorations, statues of your dolls, pictures to mark special moments, and even fridge stickers. You also constantly expand the crew deck whenever you level it up, making it feel like a completely new layer to the game. So should you jump into Girls Frontline 2 right now, you'll have a ton of great content to work through and characters to both meet and build. There's quite a lot of main story chapters and older events that have been added into the mix permanently, so it will take a while for you to get fully caught up. And it's also not like the journey stops there. There's a ton more content coming our way in the form of future updates, bringing new events, characters, stories, and expansions to the addicting gameplay. I'm personally very much looking forward to having my beloved AK-15 return to the fold, and I can't wait to see how the developers expand things like the crew deck, add new minigames and even more layers to the team building in Girls Frontline 2. It's pretty safe to say that in a year filled with amazing games, expansions, updates, and news in the greater gacha sphere, Girls Frontline 2 managed to stay at the top of my ranking with its insanely rich content, addicting gameplay, amazing expansions to both lore and just content in general. But what is your favorite gacha game of 2025? And have you played Girls Frontline 2 yet, or are you trying to dip in? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, subscribing, or even joining the channel, as I post regular deep dives and reviews into the games that I love.